have the new episode and we will discuss on homelessness in America today. This is major problem in Bangladesh for housing companies, and we find this is South Asia. We finish our tour in India. We work with IIT Kanpur. India has also massively problem on homelessness. So we have our world famous speaker, Mr. Mike, Madam Jasmine, and Mr. Dark. So first, I would like to give chance Mr. Mike for his presentation.
Hello, everyone. Dr. Sharif, thank you so much for having us on again. So the topic today is going to be poverty. In the first half, I want to talk about facts and data. I like data. And a lot of you know a very famous British author, David Wood. And David Wood is a transhumanist and a futurist, a thought leader and author. And one of his recent books was called The Singularity Principles. Okay. One of his other things that he does is you could see on the screen something called Vital Syllabus. And there's the website there, vitalsyllabus.org. And he was concerned about some of the problems that we might face in the future, which he labeled landmines en route to a better future. And he listed 11, you can see there, very significant concerns. And the one that caught my eye right away was number one, the left behinds. So we're going to just talk about the left behinds for the first half of this conversation. If you would please go to the next slide.
Mr. Mike, you have to do it.
Oh, okay. That's great. Oh, good. Ha. Okay. Oh, good. So I got control. I like control. Okay. So for the left behinds, this is again what Dr. David Wood did, is he said, okay, if we're going to look at what's happening with the left behinds, what are the trends that are happening? Okay. He listed these 6 aspects of what could indicate if things are getting worse or better for the left behinds. The left behinds would be people who are homeless, people who are unemployed, people who are the working poor. You see, okay, so, but after he did this, he was not able to, he's a very busy man. He did not actually collate and collect all the information on these factors, which is what I did. And so we're going to talk about these factors and what's happening. First one is how much of the share of national wealth is in the hands of the richest 1%. I'm over here in America. I'm mostly going to talk about what's going on in America, right? Not the world, but this is an indicator. The second one was changes in inflation-adjusted median household income. Third is proportion of working age people who have given up looking for paid employment. Fourth one is ratios of employee performed tasks to robot automated tasks, which I thought was a fascinating problem as we watched ChatGPT and GPT-4, all these things coming up, that our jobs are at risk now. Fifth one, measures of technological unemployment or technological underemployment. And then lastly, very concerning, the numbers of what's called deaths of despair or near deaths of despair. Okay, so let's go on and start talking about these. So the very first one is the share of American national wealth in the hands of the richest 1%. And in the upper right-hand corner of each of these slides, you're going to see thumbs up or thumbs down on which way the trend is going. And so you see here that now the top 1% now holds 1/3 of all the wealth in this country, up from a little less than a quarter. So in 1989, they had 25%. Now they've got 33%. Okay, so obviously a larger chunk of American national wealth is going into the top 1% of the people in this country. So obviously the left behinds are getting even more left behind. Okay. Another way of looking at this, right, is let's look at a different source rather than just like a web article. This is from the St. Louis Federal Reserve. And these are people who are government officials, very well versed in economics, and they put out really well thought out statistics. You'll see me showing graphs from the Federal Reserve throughout this presentation. And you see very graphically, instead of just the description, the 1% used to in 1990 have about 23, 24% of the total wealth of the country. And you can see that they are taking more and more of America's wealth going to the top 1%. Is a very clear trend. You can see that more and more. And my comment at the bottom there is, it does not look like trickle-down economics to me. Trickle-down economics, if you've never heard of this before, when I was a youngster, there was a President, Ronald Reagan, and he and his crew said, it's okay if the wealthy get wealthier, and when they get that money, they're going to spend that money, and that wealth will trickle down to the left behinds. Well, it doesn't look like that's happening at all, okay? So number 2, let's go on to the second indicator. And you can see the thumbs up here. So this will be a rare one where things look like they're going a little bit better for the common man, right? So this is the changes in inflation-adjusted median household income, right? So this is, if you took kind of your average home and you used it in constant dollars, so inflation is not a problem, right? It's the same dollars in 1990 as they are in 2020, right? Same dollars. You can see that the average American home is getting their household income is going up from $56,000 a year roughly to more like $72,000. So that is a good trend, okay? Your average American is making a little bit more money than he used to. So that's good. Let's keep going. This is a very concerning one for me. Number 3, the proportion of working age people who've given up looking for paid employment, right? So these are people, let's say between the age of maybe 25 and 65 or 25 and 55, okay? This is just for men. And the question is, what percentage of American men are still looking for work or working, right? Okay. So this is the labor force participation rate for men from the Federal Reserve. How many men are actually in the workforce in that right age? So in 1950, you can see that over 85% of American men of working age, 25 to 55, let's say, 85% or more were working. And as the decades have gone by in the last 70 years, instead of over 85% of American men working, you're down around, 67% or so. So you've lost 20% of American men who would be expected to be not in school and not retired. You've lost 20% of those men, okay? And as my comments at the bottom of the slide, this is truly abysmal. It looks like the hollowing out of America, and it looks like the birth of what we call the Rust Belt. So there used to be an area in America in the middle of the country, Ohio and Pennsylvania, where they used to have a lot of steel mills. All that work went away, and it became, instead of like the steel belt, it became the Rust Belt. Let's see what's next. The 4th indicator, okay? Ratios of employee performed tasks to robot automated tasks. Now, this is something that in our last podcast we were talking about a little bit. I am concerned about cognitive automation, the robots and artificial intelligence starting to take work away from human workers. And when we aren't working, we aren't getting paid. So that's a problem, right? So here's I thought it was fascinating, a very short period of time, about 4 years, between 2018 and 2022, different types of jobs that people do. And the question was, what percentage is the human work as currently? Okay, so first characteristic, information and data processing. In 2018, it was 53%, but by 2022, only 4 years later, is down to 38%. Now, this kind of makes sense, right? You'd want computers doing more information and data processing, right? So not surprising that that has slid, but that means a lot fewer people doing the data clerk work. Let's go next one. Looking for receiving job-related information, right? So these are people who are answering the phone about jobs that are coming in and out. Used to be 2/3, now it's less than half. Next one down, performing complex and technical activities. Okay, you would think complex activities, probably not going to be left for the computer, just do it automatically, right? Used to be 2/3, now it's 54%. You go to the second column, identifying and evaluating job, they misspelled it, was relevant information, okay? This is a task that you would expect humans to be doing all the time, frankly. Used to be 71%, quite high percentage. Now it's down to, in 2022, down to 54%. Another one interesting, performing physical and manual work activities. Used to be around 70%, now it's 56%. Think of Amazon warehouse where the robots are moving everything around now. Not people going back to find stuff and bring it up to the front to box it. It's more robots. Administering. Okay, this is watching over what other people are doing. This is more like management work. Was 72%, down to 56%. Lastly, communicating and interacting, 77 to 69%. So over a short 4-year period, you're seeing between 10 and 20% erosion in the amount of work that humans are doing. This is a big decline. And remember, this is well before we got our Chat GPT, GPT-4 surprise, right? So you can only expect this decline in human work to accelerate. So let's, I'm going to try to get the slide to go. Here we go. Number 5. All right. It's a continuation of the same topic. Now I got a few graphs here. I'm going to hang on this one because, again, this topic is kind of critical to me, right? How much are the robots taking the jobs, right? So here's a graph, and basically it goes all the way back to 1950. Okay, and you see in this graph, two things are plotted out. Employment, that's how many people are hired, how many people are working, in red, and in blue, productivity, right? So as more people got hired, there was more productivity, they worked together, they ascended together. This was kind of the story of America, right? Back in 1950, as technology improved, people got more work, they became wealthier, they were paid more, things worked together. There is a very interesting divergence that occurs about in 2000 here, where employment starts flattening out and separates from the rate of change or increase in productivity. Productivity takes off, but employment does not. They don't need people doing the jobs for productivity to go up. So I think I have some zoom ups now. So in 1970, you see a close-up on how real hourly compensation, what they're paying people versus productivity now diverges. Now, my complaint about this chart is it's a log chart. I wish it was linear, because of course linear would be much more dramatic, right? Okay, so let's go on to the next slide. Okay, this is another version again from the Federal Reserve, 70 years. On the left is productivity, on the right is employment. And you see them both zoom up until you get to about 2008. Here, 2008, you get this divergence. And I'm going to zoom up on the red boxes. Oh, wait, did I lose one? No, here it is. Okay, so this is the zoom up since 2000. And I've got some crosshairs on it. So you can see on the left, productivity zooms up, and over here, employment does not. Okay, so for measures of technological unemployment, we've seen a number of different indicators that say technology productivity is zooming up. This is how the wealthy are getting wealthier, right? Productivity means profit, but the people aren't being hired. Okay. I think we're almost to the end here. Number 6. This is a sad indicator. Okay. Numbers of deaths of despair. So if you haven't heard this one before, I put this slide in. 2015, Case and Deaton did a pivotal study on the increases in deaths attributable to drug overdose, alcohol liver disease, and suicides. Okay. Between 1999 and 2013. So they were focused on this period of time. If you notice, the year 2000 seems to be kind of an indicator of big changes. It's not just productivity and employment, okay? So these are 2 researchers who then went, here's another view of the kind of data involved here. Different source now. Congress, U.S. Congress investigated this. They've got an economic committee, and they looked at the different components and graphed them. Suicide, alcohol, drugs. And you see that starting in about 2000, all of them start increasing, okay? Here's the tricky part about this. If you put them all together, you see the gray deaths of despair skyrockets, okay? If you look at them individually, okay, they're increasing, all right? You notice the drugs deaths are really zooming, right? Okay. Let's see. I want to make sure I didn't. Yeah, okay. So deaths of despair is obviously a thumbs down. Things are obviously getting worse for the left behinds. So here's the summary of the 6 aspects or technical or data-driven trends for the left behinds, the people who are homeless or unemployed or the working poor, people who don't have all the advantages of life. Number 1 is a thumbs down, it's getting worse, but only number 2, median household income is moderately better. All of the rest of the indicators are sliding down. And here's, so here's the final score, right? There's only 1 that's going up. 5 of these indicators are declining. And then kind of ironic, but none of these are photographs. I'm using new artificial intelligence here to create these images. None of them are photographs. These are all things that I made using Midjourney, which uses GPT, GPT-4 to create these images of people who are struggling, people who are like on the left. This fella is in a tent city in the rain. This lady here is in an alley, right? She's not happy. This poor old man, he's worked his whole life, but things didn't go well for him. Him and his pal here, his puppy dog, are in a tent city in the rain. This lady here, she's trying to sleep in her car. That's where a lot of people, not just the tent cities, they sleep in cars, they sleep in RVs. And then I've got a picture here of people outside waiting for shelter or food in the snow. So conditions are worsening, Dr. Sharif, for the left behinds across what most people would consider the richest nation on earth. Things are getting tougher for the common man. So that's my understanding of the conditions for homelessness. It's a theoretical and data-driven view. This is where my friends Dirk and Jasmine can talk about things that they've seen as they do their good work, trying to help those who have been left behind. So that's my presentation, my friend.
Thank you. Excellent presentations. We can understand the US economy and US present situation, especially for homeless people. Mr. Dark, what you want to share?
Well, I I really liked the presentation. I thought it was interesting to see how things spiked during COVID, and that it seemed like there were services shut down, and even the basics that a lot of the homeless depend on that were available pre-COVID just disappeared overnight. Um, I I I wonder if it's the left behinds are truly left behind, or if there is just a gap now between the haves and the have nots that have increased to the point that the people are just without hope. Um, I I work with a lot of people on employment right now, and we work out of an outreach, and it seems that even if we find someone employment, the wage that they're taking home isn't enough to survive on, and they have a general lack of hope.
For sure.
And so, go ahead.
I was just going to agree. Sorry.
And when you find people that are desperate and out of hope, even if there are resources available to them, um, I'm finding that there's a lot of drug use and mental instability involved because they turn to things that they can find comfort in because it's a very harsh place right now out there on the street.
Okay, thank you. Jasmine, what you want to add for this presentation?
Um, well, I would say like what Dirk was commenting on, and there is such a high number of barriers for anybody that is homeless. A lot of documentation that you need, a lot of paperwork that you need, and things are still, although everything is coming out of COVID from everything being shut down. There's still a lot of things that are not available the way they were before. So the barriers are still in place, but it's kind of not acknowledged. So it's just put onto people to try to access all of these things, which are much harder to gain access to. And um, a lot of that big gap there where they're trying to get all of the things that they need to gain employment or to gain housing, whichever it is, or both usually. And it's not that simple. It's a lot of waiting. By the time you get anything, the opportunities are gone. And so that hopelessness, like Dirk was talking about, there's a lot of, um, there's a consistent list of things to get done, but no opportunity to do them. So that's,
And another one thing I just wanted to add to that too is when you find something that works and the word gets out, that service or that help that is working for them, it's so inundated so fast
mhm.
that it's like a tsunami and they just get swamped and it closes almost as fast as it comes up.
Mhm. Thank you. Mr. Mike, when you're discussing about homelessness in America, we know that uh, the USA has big economy, definitely, world number one economy. So, what is the role of the richest man in your country? How they are helping?
Yeah, it's a fascinating question, and I'm going to say it pretty bluntly. The attitude in America tends to be that you're on your own and you're responsible for whatever happens to you. Um, there used to be a phrase that people would kind of use when somebody was down on their luck, and it was kind of like, "That's too bad for you," or "Hey, that's that's just your problem to deal with. And so what you see is the rich get richer, and they aren't necessarily helping out the poorest among them. Okay, uh, let me change topic just a twist a little bit here. One of the reasons Jasmine and I started working together is we both have a concern about worsening unemployment, worsening homelessness. She and I had two different concerns. I want to brag a little bit on Jasmine, and maybe she can pull on this a little bit. Several years ago, you both, Dirk and Jasmine, have talked about the COVID pandemic. Okay. A couple of years ago, Jasmine and I were talking, and she said, Mike, when the eviction moratorium is lifted, there's going to be a lot of people who are going to be suddenly homeless. And so let's talk about this a little bit, because let's just say that the landlords have money. They're the ones who own the apartment buildings. In some cases, it's large corporations like BlackRock who've bought up a lot of real estate. Okay. So the rich have these places. They're the landlords. Okay. During the pandemic, our government said no one can be booted out of their apartment just because they can't pay rent, because a lot of people weren't working. But okay, who's paying the bills? And the landlords, as soon as this prohibition was lifted, then they raised the rents. And now it's not so much, I would emphasize, perhaps not who are having struggles with alcohol or drugs. It's the working poor, because they simply cannot afford the rent. We're not talking about like characteristics or habits, bad habits that you would frown on, like, let's say, addictions. Okay. It's really people who are trying their best, but just cannot make enough money. So that was a very long way of saying, Jasmine, a lead into, you have an insight into which way things are going in the homeless. Are there more homeless now, Jasmine?
Absolutely. And the number is just going up and going up every day. More and more people just cannot afford the rental cost. And if they can't afford the food. And all the services just don't connect. And people, if you're a single parent household, you simply will not be able to rent anything that is considered legal for you to rent, because kids have to have their space and all the different things that go into all of that, the way that the system is set up. So if you're on a single family or single parent income, you simply cannot rent a place. There's a lot of people living in cars in the parking lots of where they're employed. And just trying to do any of those things. And with that, everything is really leaning on the credit scores now. So if you have any medical conditions, mental health conditions, those things, all the collection agencies all continued working during everything, people being unemployed. So those kept continuing to go. And a lot of people found themselves not only unable to rent and having bad credit and those sorts of things without income, because all the jobs shifted as well. And they also found themselves in court trying with lawsuits against them to collect large sums of money that they simply do not have. And with you have anything like that going on, nobody will rent to you. So you're homeless.
Mr. Dark, anything you want to add?
I agree with her. It seems like we see a progression where anything like a health calamity or something going on with your kids will upset it. And you see a progression. Someone goes from a house to something that they can barely rent, that they're living with other people in, to living in their car, to on the street. And it's a shame. But you're seeing more and more people now that, as Mike put it, we're the working poor, living paycheck to paycheck, that if something comes up, they can't bridge that gap.
Mr. Mike, I'm just trying to understand the US economy properly. That's why I'm asking this question. Let's say Bangladesh or Malaysia, it's a Muslim country. So we have a process of zakat, you know, the Muslim community, those who are rich, every year, now is Ramadan, so every year we have to pay a amount of money to the poor. And this is actually the Muslim countries, it helps to restructure the economic process every month, especially in Ramadan. We did it. I know many large corporations, uh, they develop their trust because they have a lot of money to pay as a zakat to the rich, poor peoples, and they help them to develop their housing. Uh, 8 years before I work with United Trust, they build up hospitals, housing, school, college, mosque, everything. USA has this kind of process, or what do you think?
Yeah, and you know, when I talk about this, I'm going to exaggerate a little bit. Of course, the U.S. federal government does have programs for unemployment and for supporting housing. What I think we're trying to get across is that the services provided are nowhere near large enough to provide for the people who actually need it. So I'm trying to say it's insufficient. And I would compare this with maybe some of the more, let's say, socialist bent European countries that put a higher priority on supporting people who are struggling. America is a place that tends to um, blame the person who is having the bad luck for their bad luck rather than extending a whole lot of help. And I think this is something I'm going to have to look into a little bit more is the percentage of, let's say, revenue in the country, how much of that goes to social services. I think you're going to find it's not nearly enough. Let me give you a, a small example of this that Jasmine perhaps can talk about. It also has to do with the changes with the COVID pandemic. Uh, Not very well, but sometimes there are places like public washrooms so that people who are homeless have a place to go, you know, a place to defecate, a place to urinate, right? Because they do not have their own home. Okay. These are not pleasant topics, but we're all humans. Okay. During the COVID pandemic, a lot of these public washrooms were locked up. They didn't want to spread the pandemic, right? So if you're homeless, where are you going? You're going to the bathroom on the sidewalk or in the street, okay, in a doorway, okay? And so Jasmine and Dirk have been working on some ideas, and I believe Jasmine invented a way for some of the homeless to deal with this particular issue that you would think that in an advanced country like America, we would not have a problem with people not having a place to go to the bathroom, but we do have this problem. And so, Jasmine, please explain this great thing that you're working on now.
Um, well, and really working with the community and building those trusted relationships, some of those topics come up because it was something too that the community, the business owners, people were complaining about. So trying to problem solve those things to try to keep, our services and other services available for people. We talked about doing we call them number 2 kits, where they're just available in a bag, and it's little porta potty bags with single wipes and gloves. And we have hand sanitizers available, and they get to have those, and we put enough in so that they have throughout the time. And then they can dispose of that in the local dumpsters or trash cans that are available in the city instead of trying to find a little corner somewhere to try get a little bit of privacy and use the restroom in a city. It's one of those things. And one of the things that, like you were talking about with the money, so working in the housing, and I was tracking money that was coming through these programs with the federal government that were going to different organizations, and they would get those contracts, and I would follow the trail of the money, and then the contracts, when they landed, I would contact them immediately, and they would tell me there was no money. And what was happening, what I found was they were hiring more people to manage these contracts, and they were hiring more people to make the plans for the funds with the contracts. And we've seen a huge problem with the money it's absorbed before it makes it to the people that needs it. That's a lot of what's happening.
Thank you. Mr. Dark. Yeah. Can you unmute yourself? Mr. Dark, can you
Dirk,
unmute
you're
yourself?
on mute.
I apologize. Sorry.
No.
So, talking about healthcare and a basic food monies that come through. So during the pandemic, they had a freeze on denying people healthcare and basic food. And so they had a program where if they were homeless, they could have basic preventative healthcare and they could get basic food of an amount of $281 a month. And it just came up that they discontinued that 2 weeks ago. And at the outreach, when you don't have an address, we receive a lot of mail for people. And so the mail would come in, and I would try and get with the homeless people as they came in to get food or clothing or some of the necessities. And in the forms, there was a 12-page form that you had to fill out to reinstate these services, to keep up with it, or you would be discontinued. And so the people that came in that I was able to match up with, I sat down and I went through the forms, and we filled out the paperwork and we turned it back in. And because there's such a demand now with the amount of people that are applying for services, some of the responses we got back they went into the mail 3 days before the people would have had to respond. So by the time the mail actually reached the office, they were already denied because there's no way for it to be returned in time. That's one of the barriers that I see is that, when people get to the point where they're that down and out, where they have one central mail collection place, or they have applying for a job without a physical address or no place to check in, it's just difficult to pull yourself up.
Thank you. Mr. Mike, homelessness is a major problem around the world. How we can work together to solve this complex problem?
Yeah. I'm afraid I'm not going to be as much help on this, and I'm going to tell you why. I've got a pessimistic view on what's happening. You're seeing in the data that the trend is getting worse for homelessness and for unemployment. And I think that our previous podcast, and I hope we get to talk about this again in a future podcast, my concern is that with cognitive automation, the robots, the artificial intelligence, unemployment is going to skyrocket. And now we're not talking about just America. We're talking about worldwide. All of the jobs that people do to make money, to feed themselves and house themselves, they're likely to lose out to the robots. And what needs to happen, Dr. Sharif, is for us to start planning for what are we going to do as the bots are doing the work to make sure that people do not starve, so that they don't freeze in the cold, okay? So that they have a place to go to the bathroom, okay? Some countries already have a more supportive attitude, and their social safety net is stronger. In your case, you were describing how your society, maybe not the government as much as people's culture, is encouraging them to help those who are less fortunate. In my country, it's a lot less embracing and warm towards people who are struggling. And so it's a winner-take-all attitude in this country. The rich are rich because they're better, which is not true. We know it's not true. Okay, but this is the attitude: is it's a race, and the people who are winning the race get to keep the trophy. Okay, so what needs to happen is an international effort to decide how are we going to help people as this unemployment boom occurs. I think everybody should think about this as like the Great Depression 100 years ago, where 25%, 50% of the people cannot get a job.
Thank you. Madam Jasmine, what do you think?
I think it takes a lot of compassion. I can speak from experience with our office. We make zero money, and we spend very little of our own to make a lot happen. We serve a lot of people, and that can be just peer supports with sitting with people and letting them know, like, hey, we were really glad to see you come in today, that you're okay, that somebody cares, to food that we get from different ministries and different organizations, and clothing donated just by word of mouth. We get a lot done with zero finances. So I think just a lot of compassion, starting, like Mike was saying, winner takes all, and just a different mind frame of caring about your neighbor and caring about your community and your country and your world.
Thank you. Mr. Dark.
I'm gonna agree with Mike and Jasmine. It's a sense of compassion that people need to take care of each other. Like Ramadan here, when there's different holidays and different events, that it is easier sometimes to get donations and to get compassion from people. But it's just, I'm constantly amazed at the work that I do with Jasmine, that we have the ability to do as much as we do with the donations and the help from the community. It is a blessing.
Mr. Mike, do you think that the present capitalist system actually creating the difference, like the rich and the poor? And if so, how we can overcome from this situation?
Yeah, I'm going to answer that plus the previous one that you asked. As you know, you just joined the Omni Futurist group, Dr. Sharif. So we've got a small group of people who are trying to think of different ways that perhaps changes in economic and governmental systems could be used to help people bridge across to the future, in which we expect some flourishing abundance. Okay, we think that when AGI gets really good, the robots get really good, there will be such abundance of production that the cost of everything should decline and everybody should be in a much better spot. Okay, the question is this transition from the capitalist economy that you were just describing, right, Dr. Sharif, that there's the rich and the many, many poor. How do we get across? How do we not make it worse by ending up with 3 trillionaires and everybody else has nothing, right? So what we're doing in this small group of omni-futurists is we're trying to look at different combinations of socialist approaches, distributism, Georgism. How do we use technocracy? How do we look at a place like Singapore that made a fantastic transition in its technocracy from a very poor rural city-state, right? It's a small country. It has become spectacularly rich, right? How do you get people aligned, get the money working for them, the education working for them, support them all? So anyway, I'm going to say that that's why I formed the Omni Futurist Group. This is why we're happy that you've joined us, Dr. Sharif, is we're going to continue to work that this year. And we hope to publish our array of diverse opinions on potential solutions to this economic singularity, then perhaps people will consider it more seriously. That's my hope anyway.
Thank you. Madam Jasmine. Jasmine.
What was the question?
Uh, like how we can minimize the gap in between rich
Oh,
and poor.
um, I believe that there's a lot of different ways with like more on the job training, and you mentioned the prisons and those things, second chance employers, and um, not being so tied up in necessarily people's pasts, because that is a lot that runs everybody's, whether you get a job or you do not. And the gap is just becoming bigger and bigger because the laws are changing. Frankly, you can get into some pretty serious charges for things that you do when you're young that will follow you forever, and it will make the next charge, if anything does come up, you have no room for any mistakes, which as human beings, we are just a mess and make mistakes. And not to minimize serious crime or any of that stuff, but there is a point where being able to close that gap and minimize it is, coming shoulder to shoulder with people and either training them, showing them, giving them a chance, giving them a second chance for opportunity to take care of their families and to join in the working class and not the working poor.
Thank you, Mr. Doug.
This is a difficult one. I've spent a lot of time thinking about how to take care of the immediate needs, and I'm pessimistic about the future. Um, I I really feel that with the difference in disparities between the haves and have-nots, leading to the gaps in education, that we are going to see a widening chasm, and I I don't I don't have an answer right now of how to address it.
I'm going to wait, Dr. Sharif. Let me jump. Dirk, I'm going to disagree. I'm going to say you and Jasmine have the key. You two are going in and helping the people who are struggling the most. And I think that actually the answer, Dr. Sharif, is actually closer to what they're already doing, is providing a support service, a welcoming to people who are struggling, and a way for them to have a more comfortable life. This needs to be done in a lot more serious and effective work. Unfortunately, what tends to be happening here, Jasmine's pointing out, America is one of the countries that puts more people into prison as a percentage of their population than anywhere else on earth. There's a prison industry here. And then, as she said, once you have a record, it's hard to get a job. So there's aspects of supporting people who have had a bad time, people who have health issues. Our healthcare system is not like it is in some countries where if you don't have enough money, you're just out of luck here. Okay. And the same with housing. Our good friend Luis from the Omni Futurist tends to point out there are many unused homes, vacant homes. Why can't we find some way, eminent domain, for the government to take over an abandoned house and say, this homeless person can stay there instead of being in an alley? So welcoming and helping people who are struggling. Dirk and Jasmine do that every day.
Excellent.
Thank you very
Jasmine,
much.
what's your concluding remarks for today's session?
I'm sorry, who was the conclusion for? Jasmine?
Jasmine, yes.
Thank you, Jasmine.
I would say that it's just it's an important topic, and it's important, like when me and Mike talk, he's more of the graphs and the facts and the the problem solving for what's coming. And we have great conversations. We're on completely different, our minds are completely on different things, but that's what it takes, is people of all thinking and all kinds to come together and bring things to the table and figure out how best to address these things, whether they're now, whether they're future, all together. So thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Dark, what's your concluding remarks for today?
I wanted to thank you, Dr. Sharif and Mike, for having us on and giving this a chance to talk about the things that we're seeing on the daily basis. Sometimes it feels that these things are swept aside or under the rug, and people glance over them. And I think it's one of the things that's gripping not just America, but a lot of the places in the world with the new economic turns. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Mr. Mike, what's your concluding remark for today?
Dr. Sharif, I really have enjoyed talking to you, explaining what I've experienced by spending some time with Jasmine and Dirk. I think that despite their good example, my conclusion for everyone is please start thinking about what we can do as things change. We're in a period coming up of transition, of massive transition. We've been used to for hundreds of years where you work and your work allowed you to eat and a place to sleep. And that may be changing. And people need to wake up because things are going to get rough here if we do not act. So I hope we get another chance, Dr. Sharif, to talk about this some more in the future. We've got a lot of work ahead of us.
Excellent. You can join next week, same time. We can discuss about this, and this is very, very important topic. And definitely, we can team up together. Then we can work globally. Last week, we just finished our tour in India, and India is one of the largest economy, where 1.9 billion people live there. So South Asia, perhaps one of the place where we can contribute and collaborate more. Besides that, around 5,000 entrepreneurs from around the world, they attend in this conference, and we are also working with IIT to solve many complex problems in South Asia. So your contribution can be helpful for the emerging economy. Uh,
Yes.
why am I asking for the emerging economy? Definitely, we love to contribute both in developed nations and developing nations, because this way you can understand different culture, interact with different communities, and make more progress and prosperity. World Talent Economy Forum, we, besides this dialogue, we are taking actions around South Asia right now, both in India and Bangladesh, and hopefully your contribution will be helpful for us. Thank you, Mr. Mike, for your excellent presentations and
Thank you.
excellent sessions. Thank you, Jasmine and Dart, for your excellent contribution for your communities. Uh, the last week of this month, Mr. Tomdos also visiting Bangladesh. So we want to invite you all in Bangladesh. So hopefully you will enjoy. You can work with more NGO and foundations, and you can get different cultural peoples as well. Thank you, everyone. Because to all of our audience, please share our content with your government agency, corporation, and academy. Thank you. Bye bye, and take care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.